Good morning, junior hockey fans. This is Stephen Heisler with my co-host today, Eric Ballard. You are watching the Junior Hockey Morning Show. We are on the World Sports Broadcasting Network, WSBN.TV, Facebook, X, YouTube. Hopefully this morning you're watching from your car, from wherever you are. A little quick sideline. I've been kind of out of service here for the last week or so. I'm dealing with some side effects from head injuries. So if my speech is a little bit off, I'm not drunk, but I am slightly medicated. Eric, I needed your help today because I don't know if I can do this for 15, 20 minutes on my own. So you're going to have to step in and keep me from being a fumbling, bumbling fool, which you've been doing for 25 years.
So. It's been a long time, buddy, and it's not just taking care of you taking care of me as well. But it's been we haven't talked on the show since the World Juniors, and I haven't seen you since mid-January. So this is exciting.
Good stuff. So today's topic, I'm going to really get angry outcomes from around the country, maybe even both countries today. And Eric is a USA Hockey guy through and true, and I can appreciate that. But I'm kind of pissed today. So if you go back and watch this morning's or see this morning's article on heishockey.com, I'm poking the bear again regarding import restrictions. Eric, soccer, basketball, baseball, gymnastics, pretty much every other sport with the exception of hockey. And I'm going to look at Canada first, who has the biggest open door policy for immigration probably on the planet. Anybody can move to Canada and have a good life, but God forbid, if you go to Canada and you're from Slovakia or Russia or Sweden, your son is not allowed to play hockey in the Canadian Junior Hockey League. You come to the United States and you want to play hockey, they limit the number of opportunities for non-U.S. citizens. To me, Eric, that's dead wrong. I know there's some exceptions to the rule. Yes, if you play 3 years of youth hockey within USA Hockey system, you could be exempt from that rule. But is it even legal? Eric?
Well, I think the national governing body, which is USA Hockey, dictates the rules in which we play. And, not diving too far into the weeds. I believe the import restrictions within the U.S. is to protect the American-born player, which obviously is dictated by our NGB. So I know you and I are on the different sides of the fence on this. I actually like the import restrictions for the simple fact is it gives our American-born player more opportunities, and that's when USA Hockey sanctions and supports these junior programs and these youth programs. We're trying to promote, develop, and protect our American-born players. So. I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a soccer player, and I don't watch that or get involved. So I can't actually comment educatedly on any other sport probably than hockey. I'm pretty one-dimensional, Steve.
You look at why the import restrictions were put in place. It was to protect those roster spots for American players. But what also has happened is that now the bulk of junior hockey has moved outside the sanctioning of USA Hockey because of the import restrictions. So now the USPHL, the Eastern Hockey League, the old Western States Hockey League, they all left the fold of USA Hockey primarily so they can get players from all over the world. And that's worked out really good for those programs. So why does it make sense for the USHL and the NAHL and really the 3HL to continue the practice? There are plenty of roster spots. There are plenty of stalls. What are we really protecting? Does college hockey have an import restriction? No. Eric?
Yeah, that's a good point, Stephen. I think the one thing, there's no college import restrictions as long as the kid's academically eligible and has fulfilled his obligations in that regard. I believe that outside of, just, and again, I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but outside of NCDC programs that are non-pay to play, Most of the USPHL and the Tier 3 programs in the country are all pay to play. And a lot of the non-American players can afford that tag a little bit, so it opens up the doors. But if you look at the USHL, the North American League, our two Tier 1 and Tier 2 programs in the U.S., those are non-tuition based programs, and they keep those restrictions at 4. And I actually agree with it. Like I said, I'd like to see more. I like where we're at as a country when we have the restrictions, but you're right. The USPHL and the Premier Leagues and all these leagues that have left USA Hockey's umbrella, I'm not quite sure they left because they wanted more imports. I think at some point in the country we have too many teams for the amount of players. And I'm not saying every operator out there is bad, but Tier 3 hockey, for the most part, is a financial opportunity for owners. Those guys, it's a little bit of a money grab at times. Again, there's some good operators out there, but just as well as I do, Steve, you've been in this game longer than I have, as far as junior. Some of those programs, it's all about signing 30 guys, getting $8,500 a pop, and making sure their coach is paid for, and they've got a little bit of money in reserve. So I think the import restrictions gives some of those programs the opportunity to recruit non-American players and still fill that, if you will, the bottom line financially.
I can understand the import restriction at the highest levels, maybe for the national team program, absolutely. But at the club level of junior hockey, I don't see why we're still doing that. And you look at Canada, for example, and I'm going to use that one. The BCHL just left Hockey Canada and the Canadian Junior Hockey League for essentially the same reasons. The CJHL wouldn't allow them to carry 16 and 17-year-olds from anywhere else but BC. They wouldn't let them have any European imports, and they limited a number of other imports. And now that has changed. And now a lot of very high-end American prospects that might even be already committed are finding themselves to the best opportunity for their own development, and that is north of the border in British Columbia. So I have to say that we're not always getting the best players. We're not always getting the best American players. So if we're able to not keep them home, why are we worried about locking other countries out of that developmental opportunity here in the States? And we know who's getting the bulk of those import spots. It's the Swedes, occasional Russians. The Canadians, of course, are getting a lot of the import spots. But we're also closing off the rest of the world because we're not allowing all those lesser countries to really develop their players in what could be the best developmental opportunity in the world here in North America.
Yeah, and I think the argument could be looked at both sides. When I coached junior, especially in the North American League, at that point, it was only 2 imports. You could only have 2 imports per roster. And, we had a kind of a general rule of thumb. If it was a goaltender, he had to be your starter. If it was a D-man, he had to be your top 2. And if it was a forward, he had to be one of your top 3. And it limits the ability to bring in some, outside infusion, which I can appreciate, from the coach's perspective. But if we as a country weren't, honestly, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, on the international stage, USA Hockey has been an absolute monster over the last few years with American-born players. And again, I don't speak on behalf of USA Hockey, but from my perspective, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And the USNDP and some of the things we got going on at the national level for us as a country, I'm not saying we don't need imports. I'm just saying right now, we've got some of the best American-born players in the game right now that have went through our national program and that we've, basically spent time developing within the USHL and North American League and some of our, upper leagues. But I believe that USA Hockey right now, if you take a look from the women's side to the men's side, there's gold medals all over the place in the last, 5-6 months. And again, I'm a firm believer. Again, these are my words and my words alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But we're doing a heck of a job here in our country, and I'm not quite sure bringing imports in makes sense for us.
So looking at all the international players on the US NDP program, the women's national team program, all these guys that are making big impacts at the international level. How many of those guys may not have had an opportunity if there was an import or there wasn't an import restriction at the club level? I think all these players would actually see their development enhanced with a higher level, a higher caliber of play at the club level. How is adding more imports going to decrease the overall level of play? It won't. It'll make that each roster spot more competitive in the process, which will enhance our overall development. Eric?
I think that's a good argument. I would say that I think if you're bringing imports, you're losing roster spots for American players, and that's exactly, in my opinion, what USA Hockey is all about: protecting the American player and developing the American player, born player. So I don't disagree that some of the players come in as a 19 or 20-year-old in some of these leagues, and they're extremely impressive players, and they bring in a different development and some. A different element to their game, no question. Again, like I said, I coached junior for a long time. I had Swedes, Finns, Ukrainians, Russians, Slovaks, Slovenian. I mean, I've had them all, and I've had the great opportunity to coach a lot of those guys. And again, things have changed, but most, if not all, the players I ever coached that were import players over 20 plus years, they never went to college. They all went back to their home countries and played pro. And that for me, I can speak on that specifically, that most of the players that we brought in, especially in the North American League, they had no intentions of playing collegiate hockey here in the U.S. They had full intentions of having a great experience, being one of the better players in the program, and heading back over to their home countries and becoming a pro, which there's nothing wrong with. But I do believe if the import restrictions were lifted, we do start to lose that opportunity to develop our American-born player more and more.
If I look at USA, I'm going to go back to the other sports. I look at what's going on in our country now with wide open borders. I'm not really a fan of that. I think there should be a legal immigration process. And it's that way in Canada, but we can't do it here for some reason. I look at all the other sports and people coming from all over the world. Those imports or those players haven't hurt basketball. They haven't hurt baseball. They haven't hurt soccer for darn sure. So all the other sports that are existing that are part of the national governing body, they're not doing this. They're not limiting imports at the club level. Maybe they limit imports from being a part of the national team development programs and national camps. We don't see anybody in U.S. swimming going to the Olympic festivals. All the other sports that are part of the Olympic umbrella, nobody else has a restriction on imports at the club level. And it hasn't hurt us in those other sports. If you want to be on the U.S. Olympic team, you have to be a U.S. citizen. Fantastic. But we're not telling these other programs and these club level programs, hey, I know it's pay to play. I know you're paying to play AAU basketball, but you can only have 2 imports, or you can only have 4 non-U.S. citizens on your roster. In an age when our country is so full of people from all over the world, limiting that sport, limiting the participation at the club level, you know what? I'm of German descent, so the word racism kind of hits close to home, especially with going on in Israel right now and about a third of my family being Jewish. I have to be very questioned about all things that are racist related, but it sure stinks like racism and nationalism when we're locking out kids because of where they were born, not because of who they are as people. Eric?
Yeah, I'm definitely not touching that one. I think the one thing that, again, you hit the nail on the head, buddy. That's why hockey is the best sport out there. And I played multiple sports, but hockey is the best sport. I'm a big fan of what we do at USA Hockey and the NGB, but I will leave you with this. You know, baseball is a sport I don't watch a lot, but it has a ton of Dominican Republican athletes and less Americans than the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is one of the poorest countries, in the world, and they got a baseball field on every corner. And but to see your point, Steve, that's why hockey's the best sport. Again, we knew we'd be on different sides this morning on this, but I'm definitely on board with what we're doing here in the state, in the country at USA Hockey, and I like the import restrictions keeping small so we can keep our developing American-born players.
Very good. Which time are you at, Mike? Tell me.
15:26 right now.
We're over?
Yeah.
Oh, we're busted. We're busted. Folks, we hope that you enjoyed this morning's conversation, slightly drug-infested or influenced on my part, and have an absolutely great day of hockey while you're drinking your coffee. There you go. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks for coming.